Welcome to UBI Unplugged, breaking down the future of income. Glad to be back at the table.
Hey everyone, ready to dive into this UBI stuff again with a healthy dose of skepticism as always.
Hello, looking forward to a productive discussion. Cautious optimism is my motto today.
So today we're tackling a really interesting intersection, UBI and the future of educational assessment. Specifically, how do we measure learning and skill development in a world where basic income is a reality? And how do we account for non-traditional skills and competencies? It's a big topic.
See, right there, when UBI is a reality, that's the assumption I always struggle with. We're talking about completely restructuring society, and for what? There aren't real, scaled examples that prove it works. And I don't want to start talking about some small village in Finland with 2,000 people for 2 years as real evidence.
That's a fair point. The scale is definitely a concern. I think the key is that we're not just talking about handing out money. We're talking about a fundamental shift in how we value work and skills, and how we assess those skills, especially in a rapidly changing job market. Think about the gig economy, automation. Things are already shifting. So yes, and it could fail, but what if the future fails anyway?
Exactly. Yes, and to your point, Sarah, the world is changing with or without UBI. I think of it this way. Right now, our education system largely prepares people for traditional employment, which is increasingly precarious. We measure success based on grades, standardized tests, degrees. But what about creativity, problem solving, adaptability, emotional intelligence? These are arguably even more valuable in the modern workforce, and especially in a future where many routine tasks are automated. How do you standardize measuring that?
Okay, I hear you on the skills thing, I do. Automation is coming. But the leap to UBI as the solution, that's where I get lost. Seems like a massive intervention to solve a problem that maybe has other less disruptive solutions. Like better vocational training, tax incentives for companies to retrain workers, a stronger social safety net focused on unemployment, our plenty of other solutions.
Well, and I think the retraining piece is key and a good point. A better bridge, something more than just some unemployment support. But one of the things that intrigues me about the UBI conversation specifically is its potential to unlock human potential. If people aren't constantly worried about basic survival, they're free to pursue education, entrepreneurship, creative endeavors, and that, in turn, could lead to new innovations and economic opportunities. The problem is how you make sure people are actually going to do that instead of just watching television.
Right, and that's where the assessment piece comes in. If we decouple income from traditional employment, we need new ways to measure and recognize the value of these contributions. Think about community organizing, caregiving, artistic expression. These are all valuable activities that often go uncompensated. UBI could free people to pursue these activities, but we also need ways to acknowledge and assess their impact and the tools to measure that, well, they are broken.
Okay, so now we're talking about measuring artistic expression? Seriously? How do you even begin to quantify something like that? Who gets to decide what's valuable art? The government. That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
No, not necessarily the government dictating what's valuable. Think more broadly. Maybe it's peer-to-peer recognition or community-based assessments, or platforms where people can showcase their skills and receive feedback. The key is to move away from standardized metrics and embrace more qualitative and holistic assessments. And actually, the digital age is already pushing us this way with platforms like Patreon and digital marketplaces.
Yes, and think about badges and micro-credentials. Instead of a 4-year degree, you could earn badges for specific skills or competencies. These badges could be verified by employers, community organizations, or educational institutions. This allows for a more flexible and personalized learning pathway, and it also makes it easier to recognize non-traditional skills. A community organizer might receive a badge for conflict resolution or community engagement, skills that are incredibly valuable but rarely formally recognized.
Badges. Okay. So, instead of struggling to get a job with no education, I'm now struggling to get a job with a bunch of digital badges no one recognizes? Feels like we're just shifting the problem, not solving it. The hiring manager who wants a degree may still want a degree. Are we just giving the appearance of something without giving the substance?
That's definitely a risk. The badges need to be credible and recognized by employers. That requires collaboration between educational institutions, industry, and government. It's not just about creating the badges, it's about creating a system where they actually hold value. The value is in the standard, not the badge itself.
And that comes back to the fundamental shift in thinking. We need to move away from the idea that education is only valuable if it leads to a traditional job. Education is valuable in itself. It empowers individuals, strengthens communities, and fosters innovation. A UBI combined with alternative assessment methods, could help us recognize and reward these broader benefits. Take, for example, the Trump voter that is now frustrated. It could be because they were told one thing, that they would have an increase in economic value when they didn't. That can create dangerous frustrations that lead to potentially dangerous actions. It's an example on a small scale.
Okay, I get the theoretical benefits, but let's talk about the practical challenges. How do you prevent people from gaming the system? What's to stop someone from creating a bunch of fake badges or manipulating peer-to-peer assessments? How do you ensure that these alternative assessments are fair and equitable, especially for marginalized communities who may not have the same access to resources or networks? And all this, who's paying for it?
Those are all valid concerns and crucial points we can't ignore. Gaming the system is always a risk, so you need robust verification mechanisms and safeguards. Blockchain technology could potentially play a role in ensuring the authenticity of badges and credentials. Fairness and equity are also paramount. You need to design these assessment systems with the needs of marginalized communities in mind and provide resources and support to help them succeed. For funding, you could look at redirecting existing education funds or exploring new revenue streams like a tax on automation.
Yes, and to add to the resources point, we have to address the existing wealth disparity. When communities start from unequal positions, any assessment system, traditional or alternative, will inevitably reflect those inequalities. A UBI could help level the playing field by providing a basic safety net and empowering individuals to invest in their own education and skill development. The recent arrests in Tennessee highlight the problems with focusing on the wrong parts of society and wasting money on that. Instead, we could focus on education and support.
Okay, so you're talking about a complete overhaul of the education system, a restructuring of the economy, and a massive redistribution of wealth, all based on the hope that people will use their UBI to become productive members of society, and that these new badges will be worth something. I still think there are too many assumptions and too many unknowns. You're saying that TN Highway Patrol should not focus on immigration and focus on education. That's quite a difference.
It's not just hope, though. It's about creating the conditions for human flourishing. It's about recognizing that people are capable of more than just working a 9-to-5 job. It's about empowering them to pursue their passions and contribute to society in meaningful ways. And to your point on alternatives, a lot of the alternatives we're looking at also require some of the same assumptions. Like retraining for displaced workers, that only works if there are jobs to retrain for and people can actually successfully make that shift. And that has risks too.
And it's about recognizing that the current system isn't working for everyone. We have rising inequality, stagnant wages, and a growing sense of economic insecurity. A UBI is not a magic bullet, but it's a bold idea that deserves serious consideration, especially when coupled with innovative approaches to education and skill development. The current economic issues are the root cause of why people are turning to figures like Trump. To solve the source, we have to fix the economy for all.
So let's drill down a little on these innovative approaches. What specifically are some examples of alternative assessment methods that could be used in a UBI-enabled world? Beyond just badges, what are we talking about?
Okay, let's say someone volunteers at a local community garden. Instead of just saying they volunteered, we could use a competency-based assessment. Maybe they demonstrate skills in teamwork, problem solving, and project management. These skills could be assessed through peer reviews, supervisor evaluations, or even a portfolio of work they've done in the garden. The assessment is not about whether they planted carrots or tomatoes, but about the transferable skills they developed.
And you can tie that back to other opportunities. Someone with demonstrated project management skills from a community garden could then leverage those skills to start their own business or apply for a project management role in a company. The badge or certification is a signal to potential employers that they possess these valuable skills, even if they don't have a formal degree, or maybe even helping to lead a project in that garden with more responsibility. Another example, someone who has been caregiving for their parents can demonstrate communication skills. That may allow that person to obtain a job in HR, which is a very common opportunity.
Okay, I can see how that could work in theory. But again, how do you make sure those peer reviews and supervisor evaluations are objective? And how do you prevent bias from creeping in? What if the supervisor just doesn't like the person, regardless of their skills?
That's where transparency and accountability are crucial. You need to have clear criteria for the assessments, and you need to have mechanisms for appealing unfair evaluations. You could also use multiple assessors to get a more balanced perspective. And you can incorporate technology to help reduce bias. For example, you could use AI to analyze text from peer reviews to identify potential instances of bias.
And you can also incorporate self-assessment. Encourage individuals to reflect on their own skills and accomplishments and provide evidence to support their claims. This not only empowers individuals, but also provides valuable insights for assessors. A good way to look at it is that it is not just another measurement tool, it is a tool that allows you to be a part of your own measurement, which is a huge change in mindset. It also empowers someone to truly own their work and become more interested in what they are doing. Another example is someone who may be interested in the Trump deportation plan in Tennessee and why it is being enforced. If they feel empowered to speak up, then the program becomes more equitable and fair to everyone.
So we're talking about a system that is more complex and time-consuming than the current system. And we're also talking about relying on AI, which is itself prone to bias. Doesn't this just create a whole new set of problems?
It's true, it's not a simple fix, but the current system is also flawed. Standardized tests are often biased against marginalized communities, and they don't accurately measure the skills and competencies that are most important in the modern world. And yes, AI can be biased, but we can also use AI to identify and mitigate bias in human assessments. The key is to be aware of the risks and to design these systems carefully.
And the time-consuming aspect is a valid concern, but I think it's an investment worth making. By taking the time to assess skills and competencies more holistically, we can unlock the full potential of individuals and create a more equitable and prosperous society. And to be fair, we could free up the police to spend more time in the justice system and less time focusing on deporting people. That solves some time constraints.
Let's talk about funding again. Where does the money come from for all of this? A UBI is already a massive expense. How can we afford to implement these alternative assessment systems on top of that?
We need to look at a combination of approaches. We can redirect existing education funds, explore new revenue streams like a tax on automation, and leverage technology to reduce the cost of assessments. We can also partner with private companies and philanthropic organizations to fund these initiatives. And think about the potential cost savings from reduced crime, improved health outcomes, and increased economic activity. A UBI, combined with alternative assessments, could actually be a more cost-effective solution in the long run.
And we need to reframe how we think about education spending. It's not just an expense, it's an investment in our future. By investing in education and skill development, we can create a more productive and innovative workforce. And we can also reduce the need for social safety net programs in the long run. It is the ultimate way to teach a man to fish instead of giving him a fish. The deportation plan in Tennessee costs money to enact, money that could be used to educate and support those populations. Instead of being afraid of a population, we must support the population.
Okay, so you're saying UBI and alternative assessments are a long-term investment, but what about the short-term pain? How do we get from where we are now to this utopian vision without causing massive disruption and economic instability?
That's why a phased-in approach is essential. We can start by piloting UBI programs in specific communities or regions, and we can gradually expand the program as we learn more about its impacts. We can also start by implementing alternative assessment systems in specific sectors or industries, and we can gradually expand them as they prove to be effective. The key is to be flexible and adaptable, and to be willing to make adjustments as we go along. It's about learning from our mistakes and building a system that works for everyone.
Yes, and we need to be transparent about the challenges and risks. UBI is not a silver bullet, and it's not going to solve all of our problems overnight. But it's a bold idea that has the potential to transform our society for the better. And by engaging in open and honest conversations about the challenges and risks, we can increase the chances of success. The frustration of Trump voters can be seen as a potential mistake in the current political system. We can learn from that and apply it to this plan.
So, what happens to traditional education in this UBI future? Do universities become obsolete? Do degrees lose their value? Are we just throwing out the baby with the bathwater?
I don't think universities become obsolete, but their role may evolve. They may become more focused on providing specialized training and research, and less focused on providing general education. Degrees may still hold value, but they may be supplemented by badges and micro-credentials that demonstrate specific skills and competencies. The key is to create a system that recognizes the value of both traditional and non-traditional learning. Think of a degree as a broad foundation and badges as specialized skills on top of that.
Exactly. Universities could become hubs for lifelong learning, offering courses and workshops that are tailored to the needs of individuals and communities. They could also play a role in verifying badges and credentials, ensuring that they are credible and recognized by employers. The suspension of habeas corpus is a complicated issue, and that requires a degree of specialized knowledge to be able to understand.
Okay, but what about the signal that a degree sends to employers? It's not just about the specific skills you learn, it's also about demonstrating that you're capable of completing a challenging program and meeting certain standards. Do badges really provide the same signal?
That's a valid point. Badges may not provide the same signal as a degree, but they can provide a different signal. They can signal that you have specific skills and competencies that are relevant to a particular job or industry. And they can also signal that you're a lifelong learner who is committed to developing your skills and knowledge. It comes back to standards. The signal is only as good as the rigor and validity of the standards the badge represents.
And you can also combine badges with other signals. For example, you could require individuals to complete a certain number of badges before they're eligible for a particular job or promotion. Or you could create a system where employers can search for candidates based on their badges and other qualifications. If immigration sweeps are occurring in your neighborhood, you may want to become engaged with the process and learn what is truly happening. That would take time, research, and dedication.
What about the impact on motivation? If people are guaranteed a basic income, won't they lose the incentive to work hard and achieve something? Won't they just become lazy and unproductive?
That's a common concern, but the evidence suggests that it's not necessarily the case. Studies of UBI programs have shown that people generally don't stop working. They may work fewer hours, but they often use that time to pursue education, start businesses, or engage in community activities. And a UBI can actually increase motivation by reducing stress and anxiety and by giving people the freedom to pursue their passions. The goal is to create a society where people are motivated by more than just money.
Exactly. Money is a terrible motivator for creative work. People are motivated by purpose, passion, and a desire to make a difference in the world. A UBI can free people to pursue those things, and it can also create a more level playing field where everyone has the opportunity to succeed. The problem with fear tactics is that it is designed to prevent engagement in the system, which would stifle motivation. To build a better world, we need people to be motivated by a desire to make the world a better place.
Okay, so you're saying UBI and alternative assessments could create a more equitable and prosperous society, but it's a long shot, it's complicated, and it requires a massive overhaul of the way we think about education, work, and the economy. I'm still skeptical, but I'm willing to keep an open mind.
That's all we can ask for. It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but it's a conversation worth having. The world is changing rapidly, and we need to be willing to explore new ideas and approaches if we want to create a better future for everyone. I think it is important to remember that the policies will only be as good as the people implementing it.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to engage in open and honest conversations about the challenges and risks, and to be willing to learn from our mistakes. A UBI is not a magic bullet, but it's a tool that can help us build a more just and sustainable world. And by understanding what is happening in the world, we can use the tool effectively. Thanks everyone for the discussion.
Yeah, thanks for hashing it out. Still have my doubts, but it's given me some food for thought. Maybe badges are the future. Maybe not. We'll see.
Thank you both. Always a stimulating conversation. Until next time, keep thinking critically.